All right. It is Gaza War Day 373 by my count, and day 27 of the Lebanon War. And I've got Greg Stoker here. You guys all know Greg. Wait, I didn't hear you.
Oh wait, no,
Oh, yeah. No, no, good,
no,
good, good,
no.
good, good. Yeah,
But
all
I'm
good.
here. Yeah.
Hi, Greg.
Hey.
So thanks for joining today. I'll tell people just a couple of little things before we start, because there's a whole line of questioning I want to ask you about Lebanon and the state of the Israeli army. But I just wanted to kind of update people because Jabalia is in the worst situation it's ever been by most reports that I'm seeing. They are trying to starve 1 million people there. I've seen reports of gas being used. I haven't seen multiple reports of that, but I've seen one report that they're using some gas, so there doesn't seem to be any limit to what they're doing. And then the Americans, you probably have seen that they've promised a new anti-missile system, um, which I actually think that means an attack on Iran is more imminent. I've seen people say that they think it's less imminent because it's like a bribe to not attack Iran, but that's not really how I think these things work. You also probably saw the speaker of Iran's parliament flew his own plane into Lebanon. That was pretty badass. So he said that they're planning to open an air corridor. But Greg, I wanted to talk to you. You people in this channel have been asking if I could get you on, and I was like, he's a very busy man, but I
Oh.
managed to pull it off. So Greg, I started watching your videos on Instagram last year, and you
Hmm.
were kind of like critiquing the professionalism and lack of professionalism of the Israeli army from your perspective as a veteran, um, in the US Army. And like you've become an anti-war activist. And so I've heard your critique of the US military and what they've done in Afghanistan and elsewhere. But even having trained and worked in that capacity, you still see big differences between what the Americans do and what the Israelis do. So like that's kind of like my first question, kind of open-ended question for you. Like, how do you see the lack of standards that they have and the way that they behave? I remember you looking at them partying and saying, "Where are your sergeants?" and just things like that. Like, how do you see that in terms of what effect that would have on an army's ability to do stuff?
Okay. Well, first of all, yeah, I am very busy. Thanks for having me on. I've shifted my like weekend to Friday, Saturday, so we could do like Sunday episodes with people. So
Right on.
awesome to be on here. First of all, I started making videos around like what October 15th was my first time I downloaded TikTok and the first time I had a public Instagram account. Before then it was just 150 people, just my actual friends. I'd been an anti-war activist for a minute, but I wasn't a public figure. And I just started by making videos about one topic in particular. That was collateral damage methodology,
Hmm.
how kinetic strikes work, how the
Hmm.
U.S. does them, how it differentiates from Israel. And no, I don't care what General Petraeus or Mike Pompeo, the evangelical Zionist ex-head of the CIA, say. You can't drop JDAMs in an area as populated as the Gaza Strip. At least we didn't. And what pissed
Hmm.
me off is, as an anti-war activist who got radicalized watching Obama's drone strike policy, amongst other things, like even that lie was just so egregious. Like for all the sins of NATO militaries, uh,
Hmm.
like we just don't do it. And to say that it's just on CNN or MSNBC, it's objectively a lie.
Right.
I remember calling my buddy on October 10th, or he called me. He was an ex field grade artillery officer who was like a fire control center in Baghdad, and we were
Hmm.
watching, like, I think it was the Al Jazeera live feed that was streaming on the Gaza Strip at the beginning days of the war.
Hmm.
And we're just watching this ordinance come in and impact. He just called me up. I was like, "Yo, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" I was like,
Yeah.
"They're dropping 500-pound GBUs at least." This is before they started dropping the 2,000-pound ones, but it's still, you couldn't do that. And well, like it was literally a question of like, we're not crazy, right? They're
Yeah.
actually dropping this because you know the whole media was in this gaslighting phase around like October 13th.
Right.
Um, you know, you still had the atrocity propaganda too that pissed me off. Like, I don't know, in special operations, I grew up like that's
Mhm.
the most formative years of my life doing direct action raids against like Al Qaeda, um, Taliban, Haqqani, mostly not Taliban, you know, proto Islamic State
Yeah.
groups, and I ain't never seen 40 beheaded babies, man. Like
Right.
that was
Right.
just so insane.
Yeah. And so
Um,
you just knew, like, there are lots of different paths to knowing that that's not true as soon as you hear it. And like
yeah,
common sense is one, but your experience is one. Like if you know Palestinians, like if you know a little bit about these groups, it's like that, just no, that wouldn't, that's not, yeah. Anyway,
yeah,
so you
and
had that
so
too.
yeah, and so like first of all, where do you get 40 babies?
Right.
Also, where do you have time to like rape a bunch of people on a do or
Right.
die raid? It's just like didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And plus, like I grew up studying counterterrorism. Like I know that
Yeah.
Hamas is a designated terror group, but they're nowhere near what Al Qaeda is or
Yeah.
what the Islamic State is. And plus,
Yeah.
the worst thing Al Qaeda would do is just like cut off some dude's head if they suspected him of like collaborating with the Americans. I don't know where they're getting these crazy rumors from about what Hamas is doing or Hezbollah. Plus,
Yeah.
I didn't think Hamas was a terrorist organization for a while. I mean, I
Right.
knew that Israel was an apartheid. I knew it was an occupation. And, you
Yeah.
know, I read their new updated charter when it came out in
Yeah.
2017. I was like,
2015. Yeah.
oh, that's smart they did that.
Yeah.
And because the old one needed to be updated. So, yeah, I just fundamentally saw them as more of a resistance group than a terrorist organization. And I'd, for a long time, stopped believing in the word terrorist because
Sure.
terrorist is simply a word employed by the great powers
Yeah.
for delegitimizing and condemning types of violence that they
Right.
don't like, that work against their interests. So I'm just like, and it's arbitrary. It's like, well, how do you define terrorism? Is it based off of like who the group is, or is it based
Yeah.
off of
Who the,
methodology? And should we have like an equal application of moral standards for everybody? No, because
no.
then certain people in the U.S. Army would be terrorists, and like the entire thing of the
Yeah.
IDF would be a terrorist organization. So I started making videos basically just it started with the bombs. It's like, no, you can't do
Yeah.
that. One of my
Yeah.
first videos that went kind of viral was talking about collateral damage methodology because like when we were
Mhm.
doing a kinetic strike, and this again, this is not good. We're not like the good
Yeah.
guys. I'm not being an apologist for American
Right.
empire. It's like, but we actually had methodologies, and like literally every bomb they're dropping in Gaza would have had to be signed off by a 2-star general. Everyone,
Hmm.
all the
Hmm.
8,000 strikes,
Yeah.
it's more now, would have to be signed off by a 2-star general, and they wouldn't do it. To
Yeah.
bomb one hospital, Obama had to there was a cover
Yeah.
up in the 2015 when we dropped a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Kunduz province, but it was a huge deal, and we knew that Obama probably signed off on that. And you know, so to compare the two is just insane. Now I knew the response to October 7th was going to be bad. I don't think anybody expected it to be this insane.
Yeah.
Because you know, there's this idea that we have in the post World War II world that like countries that do genocide or regimes that do genocide don't really last so long. You know, you don't have the Hutus in Rwanda anymore. You know, Slobodan Milocevic's government went down.
Yeah.
So they, of course, one was a Balkan country, the other was in Africa, and we're supporting Israel no matter what. So that's a whole different subject. But I started with the bombs, and then I started by critiquing the idea just because it was like cathartic for me. Like I was like,
Hmm.
I can't do anything. I
Yeah.
literally can't do anything except what I found was, and this was before I gained confidence in like using my like experience and knowledge base to talk about geopolitics and stuff. I was just like, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to keep it
Yeah.
tactical.
Tactical.
These guys are totally clowns,
Yeah.
and I think I don't want to send money to people who can't even do the most basic shit. Okay, so when I started learning about like the Israeli army, it started like in 2011. I was 21 years old at the time, and I was like heavily indoctrinated as a former U.S. Army Ranger. In fact, they had to change the name, but our selection process, like Navy SEALs have BUDS, Special Forces has SFAS, but ours was called RIP, RIP,
Okay.
Ranger Indoctrination Program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they eventually changed it
Little
to
a
they
little on the nose.
a little on the nose. So they
Yeah.
actually changed it right when I got in to RAS, so Ranger Assessment Selection Program. But all I'm doing is saying, like, I was pretty indoctrinated. And of
Right.
course, like, we were all about it. It's like, hell yeah, the name sounds badass, dude. Anyways, I wasn't capable of like the same level of objective thought that I am now. But one of the things that kind of started unraveling, and it was like growing up as a white dude in Texas, I had a lot of ideas about Israel. The same bullshit that's
Yeah, just
objectively
surrounded
not
by
true.
hostile enemies and
Yeah,
badass and yeah.
yeah, but bunch of crazy,
Yeah,
how it goes. Surrounded by people that would find 40 babies and have enough time to behead them,
exactly.
essentially. So, um, there was a 2006 white paper, and I mentioned this one a lot because it was foundational for me for unraveling all the propaganda about Israel.
Yeah.
And that was a 2006 Pentagon white paper
Mhm.
about how they just got slapped around by Hezbollah in the 2006 war. And at the time, when I was so heavily indoctrinated, it wasn't like the Daia doctrine where they bombed an entire city mercilessly, knowing that they were probably most likely just dropping civilian targets. It
Yeah.
was it was the one sin that my heavily indoctrinated military ass could not forgive, and that was
Running
just
away.
wild incompetence.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So like we can all condemn military competence. I was just like, wow, I hope I never have to work with those guys. And and
Right.
because we didn't have social media, I didn't know how bad it was. Like
Mhm.
the lack of skill amongst, yeah, they do
Yeah.
have some special operations forces that are all right. They just refuse to do special operations for the most part.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
that
which, that's a question there, like, because special operations, like when you were in Afghanistan, like I understand the Afghanistan war, Operation Enduring Freedom and related was like the idea was you were in support of the Afghan government that America had installed,
Yes,
right?
nation building.
Yeah.
It wasn't a war. It was an overseas contingency operation.
Exactly. And so, like what I notice when I read like accounts by American veterans, not veterans, but like actual like accounts of what they did there, approving
Mhm.
accounts. They would say like, okay, when bad stuff happened, it was because we were given intelligence by Afghans to do something. We were being used against, we were being used to settle scores, or like we were maybe using excessive force to do something. But it's like Israel's objective isn't nation building, right? It's like actual just demolition, nation demolition everywhere they go. So it's kind of like it's hard to even compare because what America was saying they were doing things and not doing the things they said they were doing. But like Israel is like, we're going to go and commit genocide, and then they go and commit genocide.
Yeah. I would like to be able to say that the United States would never, for as bad as the U.S. empire is, like in the post World War II era. I mean,
Hmm.
America was built off genocide,
Yeah, of
and,
course.
and the transatlantic slave trade. But in the post World War II era, when we became like the good guys for like 10 minutes, just because the Nazis were so
Yeah.
not cool and Mussolini was an asshole. Um, and Imperial Japan was
Yeah,
not
horrific.
great.
Absolutely
Yeah,
horrific. Yeah.
absolutely horrific. That we lasted for about 10 minutes, and then the Korean War happened.
Yeah.
And I would like to be able to say that the United States would never, my country, my government would never commit a genocide. Um, Sorry, this is the U.S. policy. The U.S.
Yeah.
policy is to enable the genocide. It's to fund the genocide. In fact, it couldn't happen without the United
No.
States and its money and its political cover. So yes, the United States is now officially
Yeah.
doing genocide.
100%. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
the GWAT, the Global War on Terror, was a monstrous crime. the media just focused on Iraq and Afghanistan, but there was a
Mm-hmm.
whole Syrian dirty war. There was a
Yeah.
regime change in Libya. Yemen was getting weddings dropped,
Yeah.
kinetic striking weddings, and Somalia was just getting bombed relentlessly too. It was like a
Pakistan.
global
Yeah.
northern Pakistan. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a global effort to just bully countries that we didn't like into,
Mm-hmm.
stepping back in line. And you can make an argument that like the global war on terror, because we started connecting North Korea to it. They're like, oh, maybe we should reevaluate our nuclear doctrine because
Mm-hmm.
the U.S. is just invading everybody. So it was incredibly irresponsible. It set like a horrendous precedent. But yeah, there's no differentiating between U.S.
And Israel at this
and
point.
Israeli policy. No, and just look at who's in government. Blinken is an Israeli operative. The
Yeah.
the special envoy
Ashstein. Yeah.
to Hezbollah that's supposed to be like trying to get the ceasefire, ex IDF soldier. It's like
Yeah.
it's so intertwined. Biden is a self-declared Catholic Zionist, which is weird because I
If
don't
we
know
didn't
many.
have Israel, we would have to invent it. That's
Yeah,
Biden.
it's like something Winston Churchill would have said about the Indian subcontinent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay.
So,
So I wanna like um I wanna actually ask you a little bit about what like why Israel has been having such um a hard time even getting past the borders in Lebanon. So I've been showing this map. I've been showing a map. Let me see if I can pull it up. But it's like basically there's seems to be a finite number of ways in to invade Lebanon.
mhm.
And they seem to have tried one after another. And as when you study like guerrilla warfare and read some of the Palestinian theorists like Bassel Araj, um, of guerrilla warfare, they're always saying like, don't be alarmed if the Israelis make a lot of progress on the map. That doesn't tell you how the war is going to go necessarily. But then you look at the map and you're like, oh, the Israelis aren't even making progress on the map here. And so I wondered, like, if you were, getting ready, like from your perspective, like if they're trying to get ready, they're trying to stage their invasion in these various places right on the border, and they're getting shelled and mortared from Hezbollah. So I'm sure that's a factor. But like, why do you think that with so many numbers, they're not able to advance? Do you have any ideas?
Well, there's a number of options. There's a number of reasons. First of all, they have a really low tolerance for KIA or killed in action,
Hmm.
like actual casualties. At the beginning of the invasion, it's why they stay buttoned up in their tanks. It's why they
Hmm.
stay in their APCs in Gaza and really never get out and just hang around because they're taking sniper operations all the
Hmm.
time. And they would be doing the same thing in Lebanon. However, it's actually more dangerous in Lebanon to stay buttoned up in your tank because Hezbollah has actual anti tank weapons that are modern, like top down, dual phase anti tank rockets that shoot up into the air. A secondary ignition happens and they shoot down on top of the tank where the tank's armor is like not as weak. And everybody inside that tank is going to either die or burn to death. So like not great. So that's why they're all doing dismounted operations, which they hate. It's what they should
Are
be
they?
doing.
I have a question. Are they
Yeah.
walking across the border, or are they at least driving some of the way and then getting out?
I mean, I'm sure they'd go to a release point near the border.
Okay, so
Uh,
they walk.
yeah.
These are long walks, and then
Well, yeah,
to
they have
get.
just yeah. I mean, based off the
Mm,
video, okay, they have better operational security in in southern Lebanon than they have in Gaza. So
mhm,
what I have seen was entire infantry platoons dismounted with large rucksacks. So this is at least going
mhm,
to be like couple week long operation. I'll probably get airdropped in food and water and extra ammunition and stuff, but they're staying there.
mhm.
And they're walking to the border. They have and here's one problem. I mean, this is not something they're used to. They're not used to doing dismounted ground maneuvers like this. You know, the U.S. Army has entire divisions that only do this, only
Mm.
do dismounted ground operations. I was in a dismounted unit. I did like 8 operations where we actually were in a vehicle. It was mostly ground
Wow.
infiltration, or you land it offset in a helicopter. So it's kind of like what we're used to. It's not something the Israeli army really does.
Mhm.
Again, one of the big reasons is they're conscripts. Like
Mhm.
like dismounted ground maneuvers. You don't just roll up in a truck or in a tank and start like shooting shit. I mean, that's kind of
Mhm.
reductive. Like, there's a whole thing for
Yeah.
like tank and mounted vehicle operations that I'm not trying to dismiss, but like 2 years as like an infantry conscript is not really going to teach you how to operate with your platoon, who, as a reservist, you're not a professional soldier. You don't work with these guys every day. You know, it's not like you're like on a sports team where you know what this guy's going to do, you know what this guy's
Mhm.
going to do. You've only been put together for like some of these units like a couple months. It's like, all right, now go and fight together against the world's most powerful non-state military actor. Like, good luck, guys. It's just there's just not, there's so many reasons why they're not capable of it. Part of it is, what are you after 2 years in the military? You're still a dumbass private. Like, it's not a lot,
Mhm.
not time enough time to know your job, especially in a combat capacity. So that's one thing.
Mhm.
Two uh, would be, again, the casualty threshold,
Yeah.
casualty tolerance. Like, they were totally freaked out when they lost an entire commando team in an H bid, a houseborn IED. When they
Right.
first crossed the border, they sent in long range reconnaissance teams to
Yeah. Been a decent.
establish, to gather intelligence, to set up forward observation posts and stuff. And they went inside a booby trap and they all bought it. And that is something that they struggle with tolerating. Don't really have a huge ton of respect for that, again, because like my Joint Strike Force, when we were in like 2012, we were with like we were with SEAL Team 6, and like that entire like within like 2 months, it was like 5 Rangers got it, and then like 23 Navy SEALs got it. And what did we do? We increased operational tempo. So that's
Yeah.
not what they're doing. They're just yeah, they're just
So
kind of like,
is that like okay, so we have an analysis of like the society, and the society can't be, what's the word, separated from the military, right? Like America has this long history of going overseas and doing stuff. um
stuff.
and so, but like Israel, like you said, it's a conscript army, it's a small country. The army has all kinds of things that it has to do, like create social cohesion of all the different ethnicities that actually make up Israeli society, which and indoctrinate them and teach them what it means to be Israeli, and all of these things that are incompatible with like training and learning how to fight and fighting for something besides like some genocidal goal. So I guess my question is, do you think that these things that you've been watching them do and fail to do you think that they're fixable? Like, do you think that they could take the lessons, write a report, retrain, and go back and do better? Or is this like something so deep in the nature of the society and the military that it may not be?
Uh, See if I can put my anthropology training to use.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to can they structure their military and revamp everything they're doing, alter their command structure, basically change their entire footing?
Yeah.
Well, look what happened in the war in Ukraine. Russians got slapped around
Hmm.
real bad in the opening days of the war, and now they're winning. They've restructured
Yeah.
everything they're doing, and
Yeah.
now they're set for a trench fight, war of attrition, and there's not much the West can do right now to like make them lose. So they did it.
Yeah.
Why can't the Israelis do it? Well, narcissism. I
Yeah.
don't. I do think it's like more societal than it is institutional, like
Yeah.
for the Russian army. You know,
Yeah.
I think they were able to adapt and do new things, but you can't tell these guys anything. Like,
Yeah.
you can't tell Benjamin Netanyahu anything. Why would you be able to tell the 32-year-old infantry private
Right.
The
Right.
idea, which is really old.
Well, they promote people when they die, right? So like this is something
Yes,
you noticed. I noticed this too. Like when
it's
they announce
bizarre.
like a major who's 21, and you're like, how could that? How could he be a major at age 21?
Yeah, yeah, but that means he was a captain
Right. He was a
at 20,
captain. He
which is
died.
which is
Died
insane
already.
because
Yeah.
like our second lieutenants, like guys who can't even find their way on a map, they're like at least 23 generally. So
Yeah.
like having
Yeah.
it,
Right. Right. Yeah.
so I'm wondering like if they're doing like political appointments, like if you're like
Yeah.
super Ashkenazi and you're plugged into the
Yeah.
political structure, if you get like Victorian era British Army commissioned into like
Yeah. For
having
sure they have that.
like a command. So yeah, there's just so many problems. And I guess what would be more helpful would be like taking all these things, like a baked in cowardice
Hmm.
that comes from thinking like you're a chosen person and you're too literally too precious to die.
Yeah.
Um, like that's something that I've never experienced in the military. You know, it's like,
Right.
oh, I'm gonna die fucking good, you know?
Yeah. 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 For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Of
yeah.
course.
So I want to. Um
And that's definitely how their opponents feel, right? Mhm.
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
how Hezbollah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hezbollah's like, yeah, well, martyrdom operations, like sign me up.
Yeah.
So, well, not martyrdom operations, but if I get martyred, yes, I mean,
Yeah.
okay. So,
So can they fix it? Is what I'm is the
how
broad theme. Yeah.
do they have enough time to fix it? Do they have another like 3 years to do that?
They need
No.
3 years of peace too. Okay, but what about the veterans of the 98 division that have come from genocide in Gaza and raiding? Are they going to perform any better against Hezbollah?
You mean who were just like
Yeah, those are the same ones.
shooting into empty buildings and taking sniper rounds and getting hit by IEDs
Yeah,
and
people say that they're
killing civilians. Yeah, I'm sure they're super ready from all that
like
gnarly combat experience.
that's right. Not all experience is good experience. Not all experiences make you better, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they've got like PTSD'd out, and it's like, look, man, did you see the video where that was like going viral on Twitter? It was like all these IDF soldiers like singing and praying before
Yeah.
going into Lebanon. Yo, like half those dudes weren't even singing. It's like, I know what fear looks like. They're scared.
Mm-hmm.
They're scared.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I were them, I'd probably be scared too because they're like not ready for it. Because here's what's going to happen in Hezbollah: you only have a few avenues of approach because of the
Yeah.
mountainous terrain.
Yeah.
Mountain warfare sucks. They're also not in shape for it. Like they can barely carry their rucks based off the vision. Like it's like just step over the wall. Like why does it take me so long to get over the wall? Like they're just not like. I'm speaking in general terms in you know shape for a ground fight either because
And
like why
elevation is a thing.
yeah, but like a lot of these guys were like working in Tel Aviv, thinking they were never going to get called up
Yeah.
again. Like what? And it takes like years to get into like combat shape,
Yeah.
which they weren't in it as reservists. Like you know,
Yeah.
doing ketamine at raves in Tel Aviv.
Mhm.
So it's just the
Absolutely.
problems you have when you're not professional soldiers. Like that's not your
Mhm.
job. So the thing about Hezbollah is like, yes, they're going to have booby traps everywhere. They're going to have
Yeah.
HBIDs, house-borne IEDs, which took out the commando team. They're going to have anti-tank missiles. They're going to have indirect fires, mortars.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, when they do get these mountain passes, they're going to be taking insane sniper operations, and it's going to be
Oh yeah.
so demoralizing because
Which we haven't even got to, I don't think. I haven't seen field reports of Hezbollah sniper operations yet. So they're still not even at that. They're not even at that depth. The Israelis haven't even reached that depth to be
no,
walking around. Yeah.
I have seen no reports of them trying to cross into the mountainous region.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I wouldn't want to either. Like, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to accomplish? It's like there is no front line. So if they wanted to push through the
Hmm.
mountains into, you know, the more
The
open part
hills.
of southern into the hills, yeah, they could. They're going to take rounds, and again, there is no front line. There is no front line.
Yeah.
Hezbollah is a guerrilla force, so they're going to be head on a swivel completely. Like, are they going to pop out of a
Yeah.
tunnel? Where are they? Hezbollah will work in like 2 to 5 man teams, like
Mhm.
anti-tank sniper teams, one sniper, one spotter, shoot 2 guys, displace back into the mountains. And they have defense in depth. They have all these prepared positions because they've been preparing for this for a long time. So just because they fall back doesn't mean they're like retreating. They're just going to another defensive location to do another, take another few pot shots, and it will literally never stop. Like there is no way they
Yeah.
can secure southern Lebanon. If they can't secure Gaza, they can't secure southern Lebanon. So they just can't do it. Hezbollah is still trying to do like some escalation management stuff, because they are
Yeah.
responsible for Beirut and
Yeah.
people in southern Lebanon as the government organization there. I don't think they're going to open up. Like really, I think they're just going to maintain the same footing that they have, in the same posture that they have since last October, and they're just going to let the Israeli army peter out.
And that's what you think could happen. You think they could just peter out.
I mean, no, I think they'll. Well, let me see how I want to phrase this. They will not stop because they don't have to.
Yeah.
We're thinking like the only thing that will stop them in their genocide, and this is what will be the main thing that stops them, is economic ruin.
Yeah.
So, what is the American tolerance for continuing to send billions of dollars to
Mhm.
Israel? Eventually, it's going to get unpopular. It's already unpopular. FEMA said they're like 9 billion under budget from the
Yeah, it's
two
a perfect
hurricanes.
the amounts worked out really perfectly, didn't they?
Yeah,
It's like
right when we sent them 8.7 billion
yeah.
to Israel. And when it comes to appropriations, it's a whole complicated thing. It's not just because we're sending 8 billion to, Israel doesn't mean that we don't have 9 billion for our own people. The fact that we won't authorize 9
Yeah.
billion for our own people while sending it to Israel, that's the problem. It's not like we're
Yeah.
completely out of money. It's like, no, we
No.
just don't give a flying F about our own citizens. We care more about Israel, because we are an imperial power, and that is our foothold in a
Yeah.
strategically vital location at the intersection of 3 different continents, and we have a bunch of oil over there. So, what's the American tolerance to keep sending them more money? Well, we already know that the middle class in Israel is leaving.
Yeah.
The foreign investment is already fled because Israel's no longer secure. I mean, there's still people going to invest in the tech sector. It's becoming less and less fiduciarily responsible, though, and people are just leaving Israel. They're going to Romania. They're going to Cyprus. Um, and there's a disappearance of the middle class who have the ability to leave and also to invest in foreign, companies, not Israeli companies. So
I guess it's
they
also like the allure of, being a colonist in this beautiful Mediterranean place and on the beach and everything, but it's less alluring if you're going to be at war forever.
yeah,
And
and guess what? Cyprus is just a skip and a hop away. Same thing. So
mhm.
I mean, that's why Cyprus is getting flooded right now. One of my main colleagues, she's Cypriot, and she's like they're just flocking over here. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't remember her name, but I see her on your show a lot. Yeah.
oh, Alina, yeah. So, yeah. So you have the economic portion. The thing is, they will not accomplish any of their military objectives. They're not going to rescue the hostages in Gaza. There's not going to be a ceasefire anytime soon. I don't think they'll get any
No.
hostages back unless they do it. Because when they hit the Nusayrat refugee camp in what was it, June, July,
Oh my God, I
that
don't
hostage
remember.
rescue operation where they killed 300 people at least.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, after that, you're not getting any more
Never gonna
hostages
get
back.
another one again. Yeah. And
Yeah, you're
and
never.
Abu Obaida said that very explicitly. Like, we
Yeah.
will
So,
not be doing that again.
yeah, it's kind of like, so I was never, I wasn't Delta Force. I was never on a hostage rescue team, but the basic principle is that, hostage rescue operations are literally the last resort because they're
Yeah.
messy. You're going to lose guys, and the hostages are going to die anyways, especially when
Yeah.
you add the tunnels to them. So I'm like, if you
Yeah.
actually want them back, basic military doctrine is you cut a deal.
Negotiate.
You,
Yeah.
you, you cut a deal. The whole thing is like, we don't negotiate with terrorists. It's like, That's what we say, but like we do all the time.
You only negotiate with terrorists because the reason they were able to rescue those hostages was because they were not being treated the way terrorists would treat people. They were in people's houses. They were being treated like uh, members of society. They were able to go out and go to markets and stuff. And that's
Yeah.
why they were able to find them and rescue them by killing 300 people. And
It's
so,
like, oh, everyone's back going back in the tunnels now.
yeah,
So well, basically what I wanted to say is they've moved the goalposts for what victory looks like in Gaza. And
yeah,
I think they learned from the rhetorical challenge they had by saying they're going to dismantle Hamas and get all the hostages back. They've learned rhetorically that they shouldn't do that for Lebanon. So they have this really vague language surrounding what Operation Northern Arrows look like.
yeah.
So they now,
Degrade
yeah,
Hezbollah. Yeah,
okay, cool. I guess we've degraded the Houthis in Yemen,
sure.
which, is not untrue, but is also like, wow, it literally changed nothing.
Yeah, and like you've
So,
degraded them to the point where last year they didn't have a ballistic missile that could hit Tel Aviv, and now they have hit Tel Aviv several times. That's a great degrading you've done there. Um,
so, yeah, basically they've just allowed themselves to be like, declare, I get real Iraq war, Bush
mhm.
landing on an
Mission
aircraft carrier.
accomplished.
I get real mission accomplished vibes. Okay, because
But
they don't have any defined objectives. So they can be like, all right, guys, good job, we did it, boys.
like in terms of
We degraded them,
yeah,
and we established a buffer zone.
degraded, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I guess like to the central question I've always wanted to ask you in particular was, you do think that the Israeli army can just kind of exist like this indefinitely? There's not like some danger that the insubordination, the utter lack of discipline or professionalism is going to lead to a collapse of the institution.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because just well, first of all, they have a lot of political support.
And they have
Um,
money. They
they
have
have
money coming
money.
every month.
They have a bunch of reservists. There are people who are going to be like, I'm going to leave Israel now forever, so I don't get redrafted
Mhm.
um, into the reserves, and we're going to see that. I don't think we'll see a complete collapse
So the
ever.
economy will collapse before the army collapses, I think is what we're
I
working.
mean, they'll go hand in hand. It just has to see like how self-destructive people really want to get with it. They should stop now. Uh,
Yeah, they won't. They
it's
can't.
yeah, they won't, and they can't. And so, all of this is so unprecedented that it's hard to give predictions, or that I'm
Yeah.
leery of giving
Mhm.
predictions. I kind of stopped doing that after July, when I thought a
Yeah.
ceasefire might actually happen, because it was based
Yeah,
off
I
the prep.
remember. I
It,
remember listening to you thinking a ceasefire was going to happen and thinking, "Oh, Greg, there's not going to be a ceasefire."
well, I learned my lesson thinking
Yeah,
that they were still like going to be
rational. There's some kind of
rational.
rationality. I think
and
everybody.
and, and
Yeah.
and it wasn't the Israelis. I
No.
thought the Biden administration, before an election, before Kamala, or sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
Kamala, I always mess her name up, was going to try to beat Trump, and
Right.
all this other stuff, and yeah, nope,
No. They're
nope,
okay. They're okay being second place if they can support Israel. Yeah, and like our understanding of what their interests are and what really matters to them, like I have had to revise that a lot for
yeah,
over this year. Like there were because if you use every other war, they've stopped. Every other, 2014, 2012, 2021 to oh 06, they stopped, and much less
yeah.
suffering than they have this time.
Yeah, and when I was making that assessment, I was going off history. Like,
Yeah.
you have prime ministers like, I don't know if it was Ariel Sharon or something, like saying like, we actually can't do a genocide because
Yeah.
we'll turn into a pariah state. Essentially, it's like, oh, okay, so that's been the traditional Israeli thought
Yeah.
within the context of their policy. So I thought that would
Apply here.
apply. I didn't
Yeah.
understand them to be this insane and fascistic.
Yeah.
So it's like, what changed? Apparently nothing. But anyways, we're we're going to keep backing them no matter what. They're going to
Yeah.
establish a buffer zone. They might occupy small pockets of southern Lebanon for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
Um,
And Hezbollah will keep hitting them wherever they are
yeah,
for
and you
as
know,
long as they're there. Yeah.
and then they still haven't responded to the Iranian reprisal, which is interesting.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, you know, I know you're getting into geopolitics now, and that's kind of where you want to go. So, you know, what do you think? I think that they're going to hit Iran, and I think Iran is going to hit them back, and it's going to be both of those things are going to be really bad. But the Iranian answer is going to be really bad, I suspect. I don't know. Where are you? Where's your? I know you just said you don't want to do predictions, but
well, what was finessed about the Iranian strike was it gave Israel a ramp to de-escalate. They could
yeah.
say, look how backwards Iran was. They couldn't even strike anything. The Iron Dome intercepted
Hmm.
everything, except the multiple rounds that went onto Israeli bases with pretty big ease. And it wasn't even like their hypersonic missiles that can go Mach 5 and are almost
And maneuver.
impossible and maneuver and are like
Yeah.
almost impossible to intercept. Even with the THAAD anti-missile battery we're sending them to Israel, it's not it's performative BS. So
Wonderwaff.
yeah, it's kind of like U.S. foreign policy in Ukraine. It's like we just give them this one more magic
Yeah, the
weapon. It's really
Javelin, the F-16,
it's
the Abrams. Yeah,
it's really gonna turn things around. No,
Attackams. Yeah,
yeah.
nothing is true.
So it doesn't change the overall strategic and
No,
operational perspective. So if Israel can de-escalate, they can just pump the backwards Iranian paper tiger of a military
they could. Yeah.
narrative, and they can just leave it at that. And they should leave it at that, and that would be awesome, literally for everybody on the planet. So I don't think that they will. I mean, they did
No,
last time. They did last time.
they did last time, but I don't. The thing is, the other thing is the axis, like the Iran, Yemen, Hezbollah, and of course Hamas. They also can't leave Israel alone while Israel is genociding Gaza. So they're
Yeah.
gonna keep whatever they're gonna do. They're gonna keep poking them until they do enough to escalate the war. I don't like I don't know. You probably saw this note. Like, I don't think I've ever addressed this, but like there was this note that's gone around where they said Nasrallah had agreed to a ceasefire before they killed him. And I don't know the truth of that, but my feeling is if he signed off on a ceasefire, it was because they also promised him a ceasefire in Gaza. Because all along for a whole year, everybody from Hezbollah and especially him was saying ceasefire in Gaza means a ceasefire in Lebanon, period. We don't even have to talk about it. You don't have to offer us anything else. As soon as the genocide stops in Gaza, we stop the front in Lebanon. And so
Yeah,
I
but
don't think he would have deviated from that position.
I don't think so either. Why, but
Yeah.
also, why would he believe the Israelis?
Yeah, exactly. Also, why would he believe the
Yeah.
Israelis?
So, I mean, the Lebanese foreign minister came out and he said that, right? He said Nasrallah had agreed to a ceasefire. It's like, yeah, but if I was the foreign minister and my country was also getting invaded by a
Mm-hmm.
foreign power, I would say whatever I had to
Yeah,
delegitimize their assault on my
that's
sovereign
right.
nation. So,
That's right. That's true.
both things could have been true.
And
I'm
Nasrallah's
not
not
sure.
here to
Yeah.
contradict him. So
Yeah, and then nobody from his inner circle uh, is
yeah,
saying that he agreed to that. So
yeah.
that's another thing. Yeah, but uh,
So
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I was just gonna ask you. You know, I think we can wrap up. But like, what do you got going on? What are you working on? Where should we what should we look for on Colonial Outcasts and elsewhere?
Well, we're about to record an episode on what we're terming the GWAT syndrome and how we're almost over it. So the GWAT is the global war on terror, and it's based off of this political phenomena kind of theory, talking point in U.S. discourse after the Vietnam War. It was called Vietnam syndrome. So Vietnam syndrome is essentially the term in U.S. politics that refers to public aversion to American overseas military involvements after the domestic controversy over the Vietnam War. So in 1973, the U.S. ended combat operations in Vietnam. And since the early 1980s, some possible effects of the Vietnam syndrome would include public opinion against war. Like we're actually seeing a lot of this. A lot of a lot of the biggest anti-war voices are coming from like MAGA world because they actually believe Trump is an anti-war candidate, which is hilarious because he's not, but that's beyond the scope of this conversation. Ending active use of military conscription. So that went away, and a relative reluctance to deploy ground troops in Vietnam paralysis. So like over the years after the Vietnam War, a bunch of like smaller military actions have quote unquote got the United States over the Vietnam War syndrome, like
Panama.
Panama,
Grenada.
Grenada was a big one because Grenada was supposed to be like Vietnam Part 2. That's what like a bunch of people thought. Ronald Reagan said like, hell yeah, we're starting to get over the Vietnam War because of Grenada. And then you've got the Bosnian War and Desert Storm. And by the time 9/11 happened, the Vietnam War syndrome was well and truly over because we're like, hell yeah, get them, boys. So now after the 20 years of self-destructive, low intensity, well, at times, for the most part, low intensity in the latter half of the war, counterinsurgency operations, like we've kind of screwed over our military industrial complex. It's no longer in a position to do a hick fight. High intensity conflict fight. It's basically just a bunch of high tech BS that only acts as deterrence or theoretical deterrence against like, high tech warfare. But that's again beyond the scope of this conversation. And it also disenfranchised people from actually joining military service. We have a historic recruiting crisis. And again, we're now a volunteer military force, and I'm not sure if the draft can be reinstituted. So, and now the U.S. position has been to now fight through proxies, give people money, give people weapons, i.e. Ukraine, i.e. Israel, i.e. other stuff that's going on in Africa, and not actually get involved with high visibility ground operations. Of course, we're still doing dirty work with special operations and CIA paramilitary forces because like, duh, that's what we do, especially in Africa. But, we don't want a direct ground engagement. So now we're asking the question, is there like a GWAT syndrome going on right now? Global War on Terror syndrome? Because like people are starting to learn about it, like how horrific of a war criminal Obama was. And it wasn't just Iraq and Afghanistan. As I mentioned, it was like Libya, Somalia, the Syrian dirty war, and other places, not just those places, Philippines, stuff like that. So is it ending, or are they trying to end it? And that's where this Iran thing comes in picture, because it has been a neoconservative and now a neoliberal fever dream to take out Iran since 1979. We've been trying to discredit them. There's been a couple of myths about Iran that have persisted since 1979 and the Shah was deposed. It's Iran is this weak post-revolutionary country on the brink of collapse. That's one of the reasons Saddam invaded in 1980, because he thought that was the case. Turned out to not be true. And if it wasn't true then, it's actually not true now. Yes, there are mass protests. There's civil unrest. There are human rights violations perpetrated by the government. And, a lot of people in Balochistan really won't like what's going on. If you know. That doesn't mean, that they're on the brink of a public uprising or a revolution. At the same time, they're this weak post-revolutionary country, but then at the same time, they're the biggest existential threat to America. And Kamala Harris just said that like last week, which is bizarre because they're not an economic peer like China, and they're not a military peer like Russia with its massive nuclear arsenal. They're just what some people would consider in Western political thought to be a regional hegemon. And they can't tolerate that. So there's these two lies going on, that we just need to attack. They'll fall rapidly, but they're also super dangerous, and they're incompatible logically, but they will justify U.S. interventionism. And Everything's about Iran right now. Everything's about Iran. So,
So,
so we're
okay,
asking, the question: are they trying to end the GWAT syndrome and actually do U.S. military interventionism again?
let me do one last ambush question just before
Okay.
you go,
Okay.
which is, do you think that there will be American ground troops involved in the war, in Israel's war before this war is over?
I'm pretty sure we're doing ground operations in Iraq right now against Hezbollah
Right,
and
right.
other militias. Well, I don't think they're doing combat operations in Israel, but we're definitely doing combat ground, like night raids, stuff like
You think
that.
they'll be on the Lebanon front?
In I would be highly surprised. It's too risky. Like, what happens if you get like uniformed U.S. operators over
Captured
there? Yeah, that would be
in front of cameras.
that would be a shit show. Yeah, and I don't know. It's not impossible, but I can basically surmise that it's happening in Iraq and it's happening in Yemen.
Yeah, that's true.
So to say that U.S. ground forces aren't fighting
It's
on behalf
already
of
happened.
Israel,
Yeah.
I find that highly suspect. Of course, I'm not plugged in anymore, and even if I was, I wouldn't say it. But this is just a supposition.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. All right, Greg, thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Maybe you can come back sometime.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.